my fellow readers. My name is Greg, and this is Ghost Readers in the Sky, where I focus on the literature and history of the American West, but then I gallop off into whatever direction I feel like. In April and May, there's a BookTube event called Spring into Adventure, and I wanted to talk about a couple of books that I've read so far in the adventure category. I'm sure I'll do a full wrap-up of all the adventure books I've read this spring into May, 1st of June. We'll see. But I want to talk about two. Both of these are rereads. One that I haven't read in decades, and another one that I read last 3 or 4 years ago, so it was about time. And I was struck by, even though they're very different books, some of the similarities in how it's presented. So the first one is The Call of the Wild by Jack London, written in 1903, I believe, written about the dog, Buck. And the second one is Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson. Stevenson wrote that in 1886, but it was historical fiction set in 1751, just a few years after the Battle of Culloden. And Culloden and the Jacobite uprising play a big role in that book. Anyway, you would think a book about a sled dog and a boy, a teenager who gets kidnapped, would not be that similar. But I was surprised at how the similarities worked. So Buck, the dog in Call of the Wild, lives with a really nice family in San Francisco, some nice place, but he's a big dog, and he gets lured away by the gardener, who sells him to somebody who is collecting dogs to become sled dogs up in the Klondike for the gold rush, for the mail, for all kinds of things. So we have Buck, who had a very easy life, and now is thrust into adventure that he never planned on. And the same with David Balfour. David Balfour, 17 years old, his father dies, and he's going to meet his uncle, who is his last living relative. And through some interesting capers, he ends up being put on a ship, kidnapped, and the plan is to take him to the Carolinas to be sold as an indentured servant on the plantations in the Carolinas. So both characters are fairly innocent, fairly, in some ways, naive, and they end up in situations that they have to figure out what to do, figure out who to rely on, figure out who they can't rely on, when they need to fight and when they don't. And I was just really intrigued by the similarities. Call of the Wild I haven't read that one in decades, and I knew I liked it, and I know I love Jack London's writing, and it just seemed time to pull this out again. Spring into Adventure seemed like a good time. And I had forgotten how brutal this book is. Buck is put into situations with some horrible people, but also with the fighting for dominance amongst the dogs is just amazing. London writes these fight scenes between the dogs in an amazing way. I've been impressed with Louis L'Amour's fight scenes, especially in some of his boxing stories. Louis L'Amour writes fight scenes really well, but Jack London, man, you felt it. You viscerally felt how the dogs were treating each other, what they felt. I like the way Buck is. There's certainly anthropomorphization. Did I say that right? It's close enough. But, you know, Buck doesn't talk. You don't really hear his thoughts. You just hear, it's not like he's quoted. It's not like Buck is telling the story, but London is guiding us through what Buck is thinking and feeling, but much more about his actions. And he gets involved in a whole lot of things, and he tries to work his way toward a happy ending. And it's a fantastic book. It is, like I said, much more brutal than I remembered, but it's worth reading. And Kidnapped, like I said, historical fiction set in 1751, so just 6 years after Culloden. And David Balfour goes to meet his uncle, gets kidnapped, gets shipwrecked, and then has this journey through the Highlands that he has to make with the help of some friends. One of the things that Stevenson does really well is talk about the geography of the Highlands, and the how different each region is, what the difficulties are, and then talking about the people and the some of the horrible things that happened with the English laws that were passed after Culloden, the clearances, not being able to wear the tartan or the kilt, mixing all of that in, a complete disarming of the Highland people. And he brings all of that in while letting us understand David Balfour's journey. And David being 17, there's a lot that he's learning as he goes along. He's never been to the Highlands. He doesn't speak Gaelic, and that's another major frustration of his, is that he only speaks English and Scots, but not Gaelic. A lot of this is written in Scots, in the Scots dialect, and I enjoyed that. Anyway, Kidnapped, I've read it. I don't know when the last time I read it was, 3 or 4 years ago, I think. But it's another one that's just worth reading. Do I like it more than Treasure Island? It's tough. I think I like it more than Treasure Island just because of the historical nature of it, and the time frame and the place that it's set. But I also learned a whole lot about the Klondike, about the journey that it takes to get from Skagway up to Dawson City. That's parts of Alaska and parts of Canada, and the brutalness of the cold. Jack London writes that so well. Anyway, I was really intrigued by the similarities between these two books, and of course, very, very different plots, very different settings, and one man and one dog. So plenty of differences, but the similarities I just found it striking, and it's a good way to spring into adventure. So if you haven't sprung into adventure yet, and you're still looking for ideas for what to read through the end of April and through May, there are a couple of really good suggestions. And even if you've read them before, they are both worth reading again. All right, thank you so much for joining me today as I rambled on a bit about a couple of adventure books. I appreciate you watching. Those of you who subscribe and like and do all those things, that's icing on the cake, as it were. And until next time, my name is Greg. This is Ghost Readers in the Sky. Keep on reading and rereading.